Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tech Stand Up Podcast. Today, I'm joined by, this is actually his third appearance on Tech Stand Up Podcast, and I'm actually quite humbled and honored that my guest, Joe Houghes, not H-U-G-H-E-S, but H-O-U-G-H-E-S, has wanted to return. So, Joe, quickly, for those people that may not have watched an earlier podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Joe Houghes. I'm a native to Austin, Texas, and honestly, I'm just the full stack geek with a big grin.
I like it. So, real quick, when we're thinking about topics, I like to keep different topics going and so forth. And when we were brainstorming a little bit about what topic to do, you had started to mention communication conversations that you had out at the Dallas VMUG, and that made me remember something that happened today with IDG Tech Talk. It's a little tweet chat that happened, and one of the things that they were talking about is soft skills, right? And I think it's a perfect segue. So if you don't mind and you don't object, let's talk about the questions that they have, and maybe we can bounce each other's ideas or thoughts off of the questions if you want. We may not do all 5 of them.
Sure.
We can at least touch on 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Let's start with the very first one. And I'm going to change the word here. So the question from them is, which soft skills are most valued at your company, right? So I'm going to change the your company to which soft skills are most valuable to you.
I would say the soft skills that are most valuable to me are interpersonal communication, I think, and then honestly just comprehension of someone else's point of view, because everybody's got a long-standing history with like their own skills, their own personality, their own life story that's gotten them to where they are, and all of that feeds into like what their perspective is and the ideas that they have in their mind, and that honestly needs to come into play when you just try and communicate with people, and not just talk to them, but like actually understand and have like real meaningful conversation and communications with them.
Yeah. Now, could you give me an example? Maybe from something that you've experienced in the past?
Sure. Honestly, a lot of this comes back to I'll give props to the best manager I've had in my career thus far. He's Mike Blum. He's actually the CIO for St. David's Healthcare here in Austin, Texas, and he was the guy that honestly sat me down, and he was like, "Man, Joe, you are great technically, but man, your communication skills suck. You cannot talk to people at all." He was like, he really told me, he was like, the difference here is that you can stop and take 3 seconds to tell somebody exactly the technical detail that they need to know for a question they just asked you. But if you take 4 seconds to take your hands off the keyboard, look at them, and then give them that answer, he was like, that is already a turning point. He said, if you take the extra 5 seconds to explain why that is, he said, now somebody knows, they've learned a little bit, and you actually had a really good interaction with them, not just answered somebody's question in a fashion that was like, go away, don't bother me. So that was having to actually understand that different people had different needs with the communication, and then getting further into it. I think as we did the big employee training program for True Colors, I learned to communicate a lot with people that were not purely technical, but they were driven by being more focused on people's emotions and feelings, or being like organizers rather than purely technical people. So putting it in context that made sense to them of like how we would manage a project, or how there was a benefit of the technical stuff that we were doing that would assist the patients or the physicians. It came across way better, and that message got delivered more relevant to them just by changing the wording, or I guess, changing even the tone of that conversation.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. First off, how did you take that initial feedback that, Joe, your communication sucks? Your communication will suck, right? Because that's what I got out of it, right? It's like,
yeah.
How do you not be like enraged at first and be like, and then how do you go about your own personal thought process to maybe help someone to get, when they get very harsh criticism, right? Because some people will get criticism and say, look, Luigi, well, I'll use me as an example. Luigi, these first couple video podcasts, the audio quality was terrible.
Yeah.
Like the video wasn't the greatest, but how do I accept that feedback and say, well, I got to learn to process that a little bit,
Yeah.
How did you go about taking that initial criticism?
especially at the point that I was at in my career and in my own soft skills, he honestly knew that that was the way to drive that point home with me. Because
Yeah.
he said, man, like, you're great technically, but you suck at communications. And I was like, whoa, wait, what are you talking about? I was like, I'm awesome at all things. But he was just like, no, he was like, you're not. He was like, you have to hear this. If you're going to get any better, if you're going to go in your career any further. And he was like, if you're going to be a contributing member on my team, this is something you need to work on.
Yeah.
But it took him telling me that flat out for me to actually pay attention to it. Cause I was like, all right, now I don't want to say you've offended me, but at least it was the like, man, okay, like there's something I'm not doing well here. And that's going to bother me. So I've got to understand this, and I want to know like what and why. And you're giving me credit at least for the things that you think that I'm doing well, but you're telling me this is something I need to focus on. And that turned me to actually say, okay, technical Joe put on his engineering hat and said, here's a problem. I'm going to go fix this thing, because he knew that was the way to get through to me and get it to actually stick. So at first I was, I guess, not really shocked, but I was at least caught by surprise that he just told me flat out, like, you suck at communications. But I was like, all right, okay. So that's something, and he gave me a couple of little breadcrumbs to start following of like, here's the first couple of things you can go do. Cause he knew I would go research and I would start figuring some of this stuff out on my own. And then I would come back and say, okay, here's what I think I'm doing wrong. Here's what I think I can do better. Like, what's next? What do you suggest? What do you recommend? And he intentionally set this up to be a mentoring thing, and he knew by presenting it to me that way that I would drive it myself to just come back to him and continue working on it, because it would bother me to have my boss say that I did something badly. So yeah, he totally set me up with that one.
I was actually, that you answered my follow-up question is, did he help start enable you to go down that path, right? Because not all managers are like that, right? Sometimes they provide this blunt feedback and they're just like, you need to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
We've had,
he explained some of it to me. He told me, he was like, it's he said, it's a lot easier for me to express this to you than to some of the other guys on the team, because I was very similar age to both of his twin boys.
Yep.
So he was like, this is totally me coaching my sons right here. He was like, that's a lot easier than guys that are 10 years or 15 years more your senior on the team. He said, you're still moldable. And he said, and he was like, you are a very black and white, easy to read book on all of this. So I know exactly what buttons to push to get you to go in a certain direction. But yeah, he really turned it into, I need you to be a team player. I need you to do this thing. He was like, that's great that you and even your counterpart on the team, like, you are my top 2 technical resources, and you guys can do 95% of anything I ever need done. But he was like, you got to realize that, just about anybody else on the team can do 80%. So I only need you for that extra 15. And if I also can't put you in front of my business leaders, or if I can't put you in front of my physicians, my nurses, or even the other people within IT that were not in technical roles, the project managers, and even some of the help desk and management folks on the technical side, he said, then you're not as effective as I need you to be. And I've got to go get somebody else to do that portion of your job.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just kind of started me down the path and started me on a little bit of coaching and a little bit of teamwork training, and that was the thing that really stuck with me, was just, like, being a valuable team player as opposed to like a rock star on a team, because you don't need that all the time.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that one. So let me ask you this then. What is the first thing that you did to try to, so if someone's going, right, the very first tip, right, to start on that process to be a more effective communicator, right?
Yes.
To start building that communication soft skill, right?
Yeah.
A little more, maybe not, the consummate professional, but something to start changing that mindset and make them think differently.
No, honestly, yeah. The first thing I started doing in my day to day that I still try and do now, and it works very well for me, especially when I'm distracted or when somebody comes to start a conversation when I'm in the middle of something else. The first thing I try and do is like take my hands off my keyboard and look and just look at the person when they're talking to me and actually listen to what they're saying or what question they're asking, and just try and take a few seconds to internalize it, because I was also really bad at having a quick fire response on anything. I tried to get out like a response or an answer as quick as possible. And sometimes I would stumble over myself because I wouldn't finish processing what somebody had said before I was already talking.
Yeah.
So just taking a few seconds to listen to somebody, to look at them and understand what they're trying to convey, both in words and in body language, and just overall presence. I mean, you can tell if somebody is just asking you an innocent question. You can kind of tell if somebody is really like at wit's end and really needs help with something, or you can tell if somebody's asking you a question and they're kind of playing around of stump the chump, and a lot of that is things you're not going to get if you are exchanging words with somebody but not actually actively communicating with them. If you're not looking at them, if you're not taking in the body language and the context with it, you miss a lot of that. So the first thing I just started learning to do was sit and listen to somebody asking me a question or talking to me and try and understand what was the actual message they were trying to convey. And if I didn't understand, then just ask them to repeat it and maybe, say it in a different way that I could actually grasp what was the underlying thing they were trying to get to.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I'm not called Nerd Blurt for a reason, right? My wife says you're a nerd, right? Because I like technology and playing with stuff. I just blurt things out. And I have had a habit, and over the years, I've been trying so hard to do what you just said, that stop and listen, let people talk, process it a little more before just answering out quickly, because I try to answer as fast as possible on a lot of things. You send me an email, I typically respond within a reasonable amount of time. I maintain an inbox zero. It's probably bad of me, and it's probably a bad habit of myself to be pushing that, right, to that quick response instead of sometimes slowing down a little bit and processing it. I would say for me, right, if I was to answer the question, which soft skills are most valued at your company, and maybe I don't know if this is necessarily a soft skill, but I'd say approachability, right? I want someone to be able to approach me if they have a problem or a concern, or they need advice or insights. And I want them to be able to feel comfortable to say, hey, listen, I need you to do this, right? Because sometimes people, they throw off that demeanor of being a douche, right? And just arrogant, like, you can't tell me, I know everything. I want that approachability. I want you to be able to come up to me and say, hey, you know what? I can talk to you. I know that I'm going to have a good energy when someone talks with me. So for me, I would say approachability.
For sure. And honestly, that was feedback I got from the beginning as well. That same manager, like, he started me on the path of just communication skills to get me to kind of start paying attention to it.
Yeah.
But then he did tell me, he was like, I'll warn you right now, there were a couple of people, even on your own team, that said, yeah, Joe is a great technical resource, but man, that guy's an asshole. And he was like, if the guys you work with day in and day out could just like have that be, their reaction even 1/10 of the time that they're dealing with you, he was like, that's a real problem. He was like, you've got to fix this just for yourself, because it's gonna cause a rift between you and other people, and people don't want to come talk to you. They would rather go ask someone else, than come talk to you. And that's just never a good thing for you to have in technology or in the business world or in such a social community as we are.
Yeah. See, I would say maybe because the number of years that I've known you, I've probably only known you 2-3 years. I know we first met for the first time earlier this year when I was in Austin for Tech Field Day 16, I think it was. And I didn't get that vibe that you were an ass, right? I got that vibe. I mean, you came out to the hotel. It was right? You had a long day, and you came out to have a conversation. I think it was me and Snoop, John.
Oh yeah.
The brand. It was just the three of us, if I remember correctly. And this is the first time that I met you. Yep. And I mean, how many you volunteered to do a podcast, and I hopefully you volunteer to do more in the future, because I'm going to keep posting them as we talk about stuff. But I'm going to move on to the next question here. Let me just look at their questions, because they have 5 questions.
Yep.
This is a good one because you like to mentor people. You are a VMUG So for those listening that may not know what a VMUG is, it's a VMware user group. Joe and I are both part of the virtualization community surrounded around VMware technologies. And you happen to be a leader of one of the local VMUGs, right? So if one of your members was to come to you and say, Joe, what soft skill is most likely to help someone in the IT industry, right? Like you, someone with your mindset and technical background, who may not have the greatest social, approachability, communication
Right.
skills. Which soft skill do you think is going to help an IT candidate and or team member, right?
Yeah. I would say some of it comes back to communication is definitely something that you've got to have, because when you're first trying to get in the door to get hired, I mean, you have to be a good communicator, even when it comes down to your story that you're putting on paper for that recruiter or that hiring manager to say, I have to talk to this person. So you've got to have, I guess, all in all, I would say it's really kind of like communications, it's sales, and it's being a good storyteller a little bit. You've
Yeah.
got to make yourself and your skills relevant to that recruiter, to that hiring manager, to that job role, to that company, to like basically make them say, I absolutely have to call this guy and I've got to talk to him to get this person in front of me to see, should this be somebody I bring into my organization?
Yeah.
And that's a thing a lot of us are lacking is being able to not necessarily take off our technical hats, but at least kind of take off the blinders that we have of just being purely focused on technology a lot of the times, and figure out how to make that technology relevant to the business. Because if we're not doing that, we're just doing IT for the sake of playing with tech.
No, I would agree. And this actually segues right into the next question, which I actually think we can have a little more in-depth conversation on. This one for the IDG Tech Talk was question number 4, right? And it states, I'm going to read the full question and then I'm going to rephrase it just a little bit for our conversation here. It says, which of the following soft skills is most critical to your IT organization? And I'm going to change the organization word to your community, right? Because I want to talk about how we can effectively communicate back to a community. Is it leadership, problem solving, or written communications, or something else?
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with my side. I'll give you a second to think about it. For me, I would say from a community standpoint, I think it starts with leadership, right? And you have to have someone that has a good understanding of not just what you as a person or technologist likes. So you have to be able to be a good leader and help out the greater organization within the community or community members, right? I'd say that's probably the first one. And then I'd say it'd be followed right up by problem solving, right? Because ultimately as a community leader, right, in which you are a community leader,
Mm-hmm.
also an organization leader, you're someone that your organization looks for you to help solve problems, right? And I feel that that's good by being able to effectively problem solve, or at least identify what the problem is, and then use some of that leadership ability to help the team go.
Yeah.
That's my thought. Maybe I'm thinking something different, but
No, absolutely. I'm on the same page with you. Like I would, in this instance, just looking at the question outright, I would go with something else, because I
okay.
think leadership and problem solving are both very, very important. And I would say leadership is more critical than the problem solving, because most of us have some basis of problem solving, and that being kind of what makes us tick a little bit. That's why a lot of us are in technology.
Not everyone's a good leader.
Yeah.
I could tell you, your old boss, I don't know if he's still your boss, but the way that he approached you and identified something and helped you, I'd say he was a good leader from this particular instance that you're telling me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's a fantastic leader to work for. I have not worked under him for going on 4 years now, and yet, every time I chat with him on Facebook, or every time I'm even posting, when it's his birthday or his anniversary or whatever, he and his wife chuckle hysterically because that's always my response is, happy birthday, boss.
Yeah.
So,
No, mutual respect. So sorry,
oh
I
yeah, no,
bring stuff out and I change the topics at times.
right. So I would say, honestly, I would say that the most important or the most critical skill for both IT organization and for like the community overall is teamwork.
Yep.
Uh, and again, a lot of that was stuff that got drilled into me. I mean, you and I both served, so that was definitely drilled into us early on. But to me, even when I think leadership to me is typically like the best team leader and the best team player in the group, because it's somebody that can lead from the front, from the rear, somebody that can um, give somebody else the encouragement that they need or the inspiration that they need for them to step out and go do their own thing and work on the benefit of everybody and address those problems or work on whatever is the objective that the team has to accomplish, and they give up that sense of self. They put it into the team, and it even goes back to the good practices of a manager where you praise in public and you reprimand in private. It's always got to be that the team comes first rather than individuals. And I think that's something that's a really critical skill that a lot of people are lacking. It comes across really well in a lot of the user group communities because, I mean, most of us volunteer because we want to help other people, whether that's help them in their careers, help them with their skills, or just help people become more social and build their own network, and even just get to the point that even if it's outside of work a little bit, it's still really related to what they do day to day, and it gives them a little bit of relief or fun with what is their career. And I know for me that's a lot of my goal is just like I want people to have fun. I like having more people that I can chat with and randomly go hang out with at different events and stuff like that. And yes, if people can get the benefit of that network or some advance in skills, or if I can save somebody from having a bad day based on some weird tech experience I've had in the past, and there's some nugget of don't ever do this that saves them from having that bad day, then all the better.
Yeah, I would agree. So I'm going to move on to question number 5, and this is the last question within theirs, and I think it's a good question. Just it says, does your IT organization help employees improve your soft skills? If yes, how? And then what's the most or least effective thing that they do or you do? Or if we rephrase it, right, if we're keeping it to community, right, and how we can go back to is what do you do to improve your community soft skills, right? And or do you do anything to improve your community soft skills? And if so, what? And what's the most effective that people have taken advice from, or the least effective? If those questions kind of make sense.
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, I don't do as much as I feel that I should do to help people improve their soft skills at the community level. But some of that I think is just that, especially with a lot of technical people and a lot of very like deep knowledge engineering focused people, a lot of them are I don't want to say lacking in soft skills, but they don't recognize that there is the need for soft skills, and they don't necessarily recognize that they are maybe behind other people in other like whether it be business or sales or communications focused roles, that they are lacking in skills compared to those others that are just better communicators, or people that are maybe a little less awkward in conversation or interactions. Um, and there are a lot of people that even if they recognize that, they're not necessarily willing to ask for help. It's easier to ask for help with a technical problem because it's something you don't know, but when you ask for help with a soft skill, that's really, you are kind of putting yourself out on the line there, because it's you and it's your personality and your own
Vulnerable.
brand and everything, right?
Yeah, you're making yourself vulnerable.
Yes.
Actually, on an earlier episode, since this will probably be episode 14. So on the
Mhm.
episode actually just before this one was recorded, I spoke with a gentleman by the name of Chris Brogan.
Ah, nice.
That's one of the things that we were actually talking about was when a person feels vulnerable, right? We were talking about getting out of a funk and depression, and
Oh yeah.
it was a great conversation, and I hope to have him on again for something completely different, since I wanted to talk to him about that. But you touched on something that I think the VMUG, so going back to the virtualization community, I'd say as a whole, a lot of the user groups and some of the other technology conferences, like the VTUG, which is the technology user group up here in the New England area, as well as Tech Unplugged, which is episode 10 of the Tech Stand Up podcast. They actually try to incorporate some professional development stuff into theirs. And I can only speak from the Boston VMUG, the Indianapolis VMUG, and I think maybe even some of the Kansas City VMUG.
Kansas City for sure, I know, with Eric Lee down there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know that they've been doing and trying to make a bigger spotlight on awareness to the soft skill development or professional development, if you will, because soft skills kind of wraps under that in the development of yourself, not just technically, but person and your interactions and so forth. So I think it's getting more traction, right?
It is.
I think we should try and get the VMUGs to send you and I places to talk to them about this stuff. Everybody, we'll have to try hitting Brad Thompson and them up and say, hey, listen, you guys have the need for this. Actually, Chris Kaladi and I did a really great presentation. It's recorded. It's on YouTube. I'll probably throw a link to it in the blog post or a future blog post, that we talked about the IT getches, or how to stay relevant in the IT marketplace. And we adapted it off of John Maxwell. I think that's the author's name, and it's bad that I don't remember this. But that presentation was received really well in at the VTUG last January. I then redid it by myself. I modified it slightly for the New Jersey VMUG, and users there loved it. That presentation is actually up on SlideShare, the one that I did in New Jersey, as well as it opened up the opportunity for me to speak again at the New Jersey VMUG. This time I'm going to do a technical one. Push myself. Right? I'm trying to push myself outside of that soft skills developer, right? Just trying to help the community be a little more social, right? Because I'm a social guy. I think I naturally am social. So it's a little different for me than it is for someone else. Like I remember the first time I met John Frappier. I know you know John very well.
Oh yeah.
I know him extremely well. He's a very good friend of mine. He gives me so much good advice. But the very first time I met John was at Dunkin' Donuts, and he didn't say like hardly anything. Like the first 2 times, he just sat there and just listened.
Yeah.
I'm in every so often, but he just literally sat there and listened, right? And over the years, obviously, I literally talk to John on a daily basis, multiple times throughout the day, and so forth. And I even go work at his house at times. We do a work from Frap. We call it a WFF, work from Frap's house.
Man,
but that's
I'm jealous on that one.
But that's something that we do to try and help each other, right? We identify things and say it, like, they'll come to me and say, hey, Luigi, look, man, like, boom. And I will say that the virtualization community, right, that the members that I've been in this, I did a not so favorable tweet, which probably hurt my chances on getting a job. And someone from the community who I respect very much says, hey, Luigi, you probably shouldn't have said this, right? So I wasn't effectively communicating what I was trying to convey. And then in a separate, we've had this group chat going for years, and I say years, with my buddies Frapp and Matt Broberg and Sean Tooley. We had a conversation around that, just to be like, listen, we understand where you're going from, and you didn't effectively try to say what you were trying to say.
Right.
And it had a negative connotation to it.
Right.
I touched on this a little bit with Chris in the episode earlier about when you're feeling in a funk, right? And not communicating out past that. I think the tech community has such a great rapport with each other.
Yes.
They look out for each other. Like for these people, and I responded back to the other community member who I highly respect. I mean, I have so much respect for this person. And I said, listen, thank you, because you're just looking out for me, right? And this is a guy that's put his name on the line for me and for job recommendations and stuff. And he came to me and said this. He goes, I understand you're frustrated. I get it.
Yep.
So to me, it's like for them to be able to come to me and say that stuff, I have to be approachable. This is what I was talking about, the soft skill of approachability.
Yes.
Sometimes I could be stubborn. I'm not gonna lie. I could be stubborn at times because I get hard-headed and
Say it ain't so, Luigi.
yeah,
Say it ain't so.
I take a stance and I'm just like, no, like, and
That's good as long as you are, as long as you know when it's time to concede or have a conversation with somebody about it. You know, if you're not doing it just for the sake of being obstinate, and that's the thing, especially when you get out into the community, and if anybody's really trying to grow their career and have like every door on their path open for them, you know, jumping into the community and being social, but having everybody even understand that you have your own opinions or you have your own skill sets and you have your own way of thinking and doing things, but that you are approachable and you're a level-headed human being that someone can talk to and actually have a conversation with, not turn into a screaming match or, you know, a terrible Twitter storm going back and forth. You know, that's the way to be effective. Not even just be effective in your delivery of the message, but in people assuming that if you misspeak about something or if you deliver something in a negative connotation, even if it's just because you had a bad day and you know, hit tweet a little too quick, you
yeah,
know, they know that that's not the norm. You know,
yeah.
they'll give you a little bit of a pass.
So for me personally, I've had some Twitter interactions because that's where I engage the most is on Twitter,
Right.
right? And I stress that my Twitter is my personal Twitter. It's not how I
Right.
conduct a business strategy, and I've never once ever tweeted inappropriately or robustly from a professional brand, right?
Mhm.
Any company that I've helped, whether I mentor them or establish or I run the social media for them, I've never done that. Um, I have, I do try to have different conversations or discussions, right, with um, people of different opinions. A
Yes.
person that I highly respect and is a good friend, Keith Townsend. I'm actually going to try recording a podcast with him about this. Is when you have different viewpoints and being able to have that open discussion, right?
Right.
He has different experiences and I have different experiences.
Yes.
Person who I have a lot of respect for, and him and we exchanged some tweets going back and forth. It was, I don't know if it was on the gun debate. I forget the exact topic, but it
Yeah.
was kind of escalated. And then, so Rob I highly respect Rob. And then my good buddy Cody came in and says, listen, I love the both of you. I don't want to see you guys getting super pissed at each other and letting the emotions take over.
Right.
I just had to sit back for a second and say, oh yeah, you know what? Because I do respect Rob and his viewpoints, right?
Right.
Because it allows me to think differently, right? It may not change how I feel, but it lets me think a little differently, right? And I think
Right.
it goes back.
You get understanding that you didn't have before. It's a perspective you didn't have, and honestly, a lot of times those are the really good conversations to have with people, because you might know somebody's technical skills or you know their Twitter persona, but yeah, you don't know what was their upbringing. You know, you don't know what's their history before that point in time, or before the couple of years previously where you came in and made a connection with them, because there's a lot of us that don't have like super in-depth conversations to know everything about each other. You know, we'll have our small inner circle of 5 or 10 people typically that, you know, that we're really super close to and we're attached to, and we know each other's stories a lot better than most in the community.
Yeah,
But you've got to, you know, again, I mean, that even goes back to the effectiveness of the communication. You have to realize that a lot of times people bring a lot more to the table or to a conversation than appears on the surface, because it's got their entire life story up to that point that might feed into their opinion of whatever they're talking about.
yeah, I would agree. So, Robert, we're coming up on the very end of the podcast. Are there any last thoughts on communication and soft skill development that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, so I would say, again, back to my point of honestly not doing as good of a job as I should with even our local user group and the local Austin community of people that are trying to build soft skills. We need to work more on making it a conversational topic, making it something that it's okay for people to understand where they may be lacking compared to other individuals and need help with soft skills. And it needs to be something that all of us just get more of a base skill set. I mean, even if it is go pick up a handful of books, whether it's something on leadership, something on teamwork, something on just effective communications. Even if you go pick up books on productivity and stuff like that, like feed all that back into the conversation and have a conversation with other people, see what they think about it, whether they've read a book or not. You don't have to start a book club to do this, but it needs to be things that are acceptable as open communication at the table as much as the technology. We need to just be able to be open with each other and be a little bit vulnerable to have the conversations, and everybody not immediately take it personally, even when somebody tells you flat out you suck at communicating. There might be a reason behind them saying that. Again, they could probably do a little bit better with the delivery, unless they know that's exactly how that works for you. But this needs to be a bigger conversational topic. And honestly, to give like some super high praise to Eric Lee from the Kansas City VMUG. He's one of the leaders down there. Like probably one of the best presentations I've seen in the last 3 or 4 years at any of the technical shows was his talk. Like seeing him in person give that talk about IT burnout at the Minnesota VMUG about a month ago was fantastic.
I would agree. I haven't watched the presentation, or I wasn't there, but I know it had a lot of impact on a lot of people.
Yes.
With that, I'll say, if ever the VMUG has budget to fly someone, maybe Eric Lee and myself could get down there for a panel
Absolutely.
on this stuff. If I had funds to do it myself, I would, but being unemployed, I don't have that yet.
We'll get you there. We'll get you here.
Yeah. With that,
at some point,
I would like to thank you, Joe, and I honestly hope to see you on another episode down the road of Tech Stand Up Podcast, and I appreciate it. And folks, until next time.